Alright, now we're going to take a look at exploiting Java. So this is going to be our first attack on our Windows 7 system. The version of Java that's on there is, I don't know, I guess about a year old now. So it is a little bit out of date. It is subject to some memory corruption vulnerabilities, like the one we just did against the browser. So I encourage you to see if you can find some memory corruption vulnerabilities you can use against it, and try those to get additional sessions, but we're not always constrained when we're working with client-side attacks to memory corruption or some other flaw in the service. Since we do have user interaction, sometimes we can get the user to help us. So in our Metasploit section, for instance, we made that executable and then played the user and just ran it. We're going to see that again a little bit later on in this section when we look at avoiding antivirus. We'll turn on our antivirus on our Windows 7 and see if we can create an executable that can bypass it with various techniques, but we can do something very similar here with Java. We can actually create a Java applet and prompt the user, would you like to run this applet? Once the user says yes, we can pretty much run anything that a Java applet can run, including getting an interpreter session, oddly enough. So let's take a look at that. So what we want is exploit multi. Java's nice because it's platform independent. So you can actually run these Java ones against everything that comes in. You could hit people's Macs even with these. So our options, again, is going to be server based, so we have no rhost. On older versions of Java, you can get it to actually say that it's signed by a legitimate source. That's not going to be the case on anything newer. They've wised up to this. So unless you actually sign it with a legitimate signing certificate, which you certainly can. There's nothing to stop you from buying a signing cert. If you do these sorts of things regularly, it might be worth it. But you can set the applet name. So if I set applet name bold thick, you can do signing keys and SSL certs and things, but we don't have any of those. I'll just call it applet. And if we show our payloads, these are going to be Java-based payloads. Again, that will help make it platform independent. Actually, by default, they're Windows payloads. So if we look at show options again, the exploit target by default is Windows for whatever reason, but if we do show targets, we can actually set it to Java, so it'll hit everything. Since this is going to be Windows, it doesn't particularly matter. We could just leave it as Windows. Let's change it to Java. We've seen enough Windows interpreter, haven't we? Set payload Java interpreter. Reverse TCP. So like our browser, this is going to run in the background. So let's come over to Windows 7. Don't be logged out. I'm going to have to remember what my password is. Alright, so I'm going to open up either of my browsers. Firefox actually has a neat thing where if your plugins are out of date, it'll actually prompt you that you have to turn them on, basically. I didn't set this one to go nowhere. Get an idea of what the news is today. So I get this, do you want to run this application? Depending on what browser you use, you're going to get a different one of these. If you run like GoToMeetings and WebExes and things like that, you probably see stuff like this, like do you want to allow this thing to run code? And if we actually want to attend the meeting, we have to say yes. So it specifically says it will have unrestricted access to your system, but these things happen. If we actually want to do what's on the other side, we, even as security conscious users, have a tendency to say yes. So it's all a matter of making the user think what's on the other side is more important than security. So I'll just say run. Instead, nothing really happens. But we do get a session. So if I interact with session 4, so we now do have access to our Windows 7 machine. We don't have hash jump in the Java version of this. Plus, we'll see when we get into post-exploitation that we will have a little more we have to do in order to get privileges to do hash dump on Windows 7. It has some additional restrictions in place that we will have to bypass, but we will be able to do so. So again, our Java is going to have some vulnerabilities. Java is one that gets a fair amount of attention. It is so ubiquitous, and it does allow you some platform independence on the attack. So there are issues that will attack this particular version of Java that's on there, as well as some later versions. So I encourage you to spend some time looking at those. Certainly we haven't looked at every single possible way to exploit these systems, but this is another example where we did something a little bit different. We asked the user, hey, can I exploit you? And it doesn't matter whether there's a vulnerability at all in that case, because the user says yes, and we run code. So very similar to downloading an exe and running it with saying, hey, can I run this piece of code?